So here we have an Avanti Pista, which is obviously a track bike, hence the name Pista. It has a twill weave, 3K twill weave finish, so raw sort of clear coated finish. Basic white graphics, Avanti Pista on the down tube. A few more graphics on the head tube. But what happened to this one was it was involved in a crash, and there's a video I'll link the video at the end of this one and show you the crash. So it was brought in by a track rider, Ryan Schilt, and he had this crash at one of the local track meets and ripped the headset out, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. So overall, it's quite a sort of sleek looking bike. It's got an aerodynamic profile, very sort of chunky but narrow. Overall quite a nice looking bike. That nice 3K twill weave throughout. It was all sort of finished quite well. The chainstays are very solid, as you'd expect for a track bike, with the sort of power that those guys can put out, and the dropout's very sort of chunky because you're constantly changing gears, which changing your wheel position, so you need that to be locked in really tight as well. So a few more graphics up the seat stays and a little sort of aero section seat stays. So that's what it looks like on the outside. Let's have a look on the inside and see what we can find, what's going on. So the first thing, let's go have a look at the bottom bracket junction. So it's a really big chunky section, which for the sorts of powers, and I've seen track riders putting out 2500 watts, 500 newton meters of torque, that sort of stuff. So the bottom bracket needs to be solid, and on this case it really is, and there's very little in terms of wrinkles or flaws in that area at all. So it's looks very good actually. Those little lines, they're resin, it's sort of they're creases from the bag which are filled with resin, so that's not a concern. A wrinkle is when the fibre is wrinkled. So, but then let's have a look at this head tube section. So the lower race and the top race for that matter were fully ripped out of the bike during this crash. So it was a very, very solid crash, and you'll see that in the in the video later on. So the first thing you notice is how short the head tube is, and so this is done for aerodynamic reasons to make to get a lower position on the bike, and also the stem integrates level with the top tube, again for aerodynamics. But what that means from a structural point of view is that the torque is and the forces through that area are basically higher because it's a smaller distance and separation between those bearings. And then the other thing to note is that the load path into the top tube is not a direct path, so it's not in line with the top tube. So you've got more scope for deflection through that area, and it's just basically less support through that area. But overall, there's no indication that there were any flaws that led to this failure. And the other thing you can see is just up in the top corner, they've used a bit of foam or some tooling material just to get some enhance the compaction right into that corner, as being a sharp corner. So overall, that area is pretty well done. So let's move down along the top tube. You can see a little manufacturing label there. Overall, consistent wall thickness, no wrinkling. Overall, again, there's nothing detrimental there. Up through the junction here with the seat post, again they've used some of the foam just to get compaction into the area. A little bit of stuff going on, but overall pretty good. There is a bulkhead there where the seat post can rest in against. Now that's a feature on a track bike because of the G loads through the corners. You can see really high forces through the seat post. So it's really important that that's a very rigid interface, and in this case it certainly does that. Again, there's some foam there in the sort of large unsupported flat area to stiffen up the structure there. That it's a foam, so it's going to have porosity in it. That's the nature of a foam. You don't often see foam in road frames just because of the extra weight that it brings, but it really adds a lot of mechanical properties to the part. And on track bike, the weight isn't as critical, so you can get away with it. Durability is more important, and that's why they've done it here. So moving down the seat tube. Now there is a little bit of a thickness variation, and you can see there's a little planar void right there as well. So just as the material's laid down, but that's the only flaw found in the laminate on this bike. So back to the bottom bracket, again, very solid bottom bracket, and no issues there. The chainstay junction, well, very large chainstays to handle that power and torque. Thick laminate. Everything pretty solid there. A few little voids in the adhesive in that join, but again very minor. So yeah, nothing to worry about there. Down to the dropout. So the dropout's very, very chunky, solid laminate, bonded in. Again, no problems there at all. Very, very solid construction. So up through the seat stays, same sort of thing. Solid construction, thick laminate. Big bonded joints there with lots of adhesive back into that solid junction where the structural foam is, and it's all in line with that bulkhead, so transfers the loads really, really efficiently and well. So yeah, overall a very solidly put together bike, which is a prerequisite really for a track bike due to the weight not being so much of an issue and the power that goes through them. Okay, so that's the review of the Avanti Pista team. So the overall impressions was pretty good. So well put together. Quite a few design features to make it robust, and sort of really heavy duty. Which, as I touched on before, that's what a track frame really needs to be. So the they do cop a lot of abuse, a lot of power goes into it, and also the fact that weight isn't that critical because you don't have all the gears and brakes, etc. So even though they do have the same 6.8 kilo total weight, it's you're not climbing. You're going around the track, so not as critical. The stiffness and the durability are far more critical than being ultra lightweight. There were tiny little void, as I touched on, little planar void there, but overall pretty good. So the design of the head tube and the way the head tube, the bearing cups basically were pulled out of the frame. Not much you can really do about that. As I said, the design is such that if you want to keep this stem at that in line with the top tube for aerodynamics, then that's the compromise that you have to make. So, and as you'll see there's some footage right at the end of the video. I'll put the footage up of the crash. I'm sure when you watch that, you'll see that not much would have survived that crash. And in this case, actually, the fork was still intact. So the fork survived that. So it must be a pretty good fork as well. So yeah, overall impressions, pretty good. So I reckon I'd be happy to ride one of these. So have a look at the
have a look at the crash video and yeah, put your comments below. All right, I'll see you for the next review. Thanks, bye.
Earlier, Ryan Schultz sent a spear through the crowd, crashing out of the 39 Ballarat Rebellion. He was catapulted from his bike when the front wheel became lodged between the concrete and the surrounding fence.